All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So, Sam, I have to confess, I have been working hard on a couple of high priority things, so I may come across extra dumb this week.
Oh, trust me, no one will notice.
Right. So let's just jump right into it and talk about what we're driving. So what have you been in this week?
So I've been in the Honda Civic Si sedan, which is the kind of the next step up the performance ladder for Civics. It's, we've had Si Civics, for the last 15, 20 years, on and off, mostly on. And this one is, the Civic has usually been just the SI has been kind of just a slightly incremental step up, mostly in terms of performance from the mainstream Civics. And that continues to be the case this time. I mean, it's a nice improvement, but it's certainly no Type R. So, when they announced the SI last November at the LA Auto Show, some people were a little disappointed that they opted to only offer it in the sedan and coupe. And I was one of those. I was kind of hoping that they would offer it in a hatchback, which had just recently been launched at that time. But they've decided to go with the sedan and coupe, and, the hatchback, gets the Type R. And so I've got the 4-door. It's, I think 205 horsepower, for the SI, which is about 30 horsepower more than the standard 1.5 liter. So it's a 1.5 liter turbo. Basically, they've cranked up the boost and made some other adjustments, tuned it to run on premium, so you can get a little over 200 horsepower out of it. It's a great engine. I really like it. They've done a great job with it. It's a little bit stiffer. Aside from the engine upgrades, retune the suspension a little bit. The other main change that they've done to it, the main mechanical change they've done to it, is you get a helical gear limited slip differential, which they don't say who is the supplier, but that if it's not Torsen, it's a similar thing to what Torsen produces.
Well, that's
same concept as Torsen,
and that's been their trick for a long time. Honda's sort of front wheel drive high performance trick that they started putting the Torsen in the Prelude, right back in like '94. That was the ATTS, where it would actually vector torque across the front axle, and it really does help.
Oh yeah, it makes a huge difference. And even a little over 200 horsepower, just under 200 foot-pounds of torque. There's no torque steer in this thing. When you get hard into it, especially coming out of a corner, it feels really good, stable. Puts the power to the ground. Does an excellent job with that. Everything feels well under control. It feels a little bit quicker than our car, but not dramatically so. The one that my wife and I own, which is a hatchback with the standard 1.5. One of the things with the SI is it's only available with a 6-speed manual transmission, which also means that it's not available with the Honda sensing package. So you don't get, any of the adaptive cruise control or things like that, or the lane keeping system that are available.
I know
automatic transmission Civics.
Yes, and I know this is going to be a shock, but I think those are actually pluses.
Well, the adaptive cruise control is a very nice feature.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're taking a road trip, it's very handy to have.
That's true. You
still have standard cruise control. You just don't have the adaptive, if you get stuck in traffic.
Yeah. And that's kind of the only thing I would miss out of that. And I guess though there are drivers who do like the car to have their back a little bit. So yeah, if that's important to you, I suppose that buying such a driver's car might not be your first move anyway. Like,
Well, it's a driver's car, but it's not a really hardcore driver's car. That's where the Type R comes in.
So how does it stack up against something like the GTI? I mean, it's down on power a little bit, but that turbo 1.5 doesn't feel turbocharged. It's really pretty responsive. So.
Yeah, I mean the thing about it is, it's got really strong mid-range. So, for any type of all-around driving, taking it on some curvy roads, it pulls great out of corners. It's got really strong mid-range, and the red line is not as high as what you would typically get in naturally aspirated VTEC engines, but it still revs really quickly up to it's like 7,500 RPM red line. So it's a lot of fun to drive. And the other thing that they've done in the SI is it does have sport, more heavily bolstered sports seats. So the standard seats in the Civic are really good, but the ones in the SI are even better. So you get it really holds you in place well. The seat backs have fixed headrests, so it looks more like a Recaro seat or something like that, but not it's not quite as extreme as a typical Recaro seat.
Yeah, they're kind of fake ROs.
Yeah, but they're good. They're comfortable. They're supportive. They certainly fit me well. So I'm not complaining about the seats. And I've always liked Honda seats. Honda's always done really good seats. The only complaint I've ever had about some of them in some of the smaller cars is the seat cushions maybe being a little bit too short. If you've got longer thighs. But aside from that, and that's not really a problem in this one. So aside from that, I don't have any other real issues with it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard not to really enjoy the SI. Like, that's sort of Honda at its best. It's doing what Honda has classically done at its highest level. How does it? I mean, it's in this class now of vehicles that are. Its contemporary set is like the Focus ST and like I said, the GTI.
It's not in terms of raw performance. It's not up there with the Focus ST. The Focus ST is I think 255 horsepower. This one's only 205. But on the other hand, it's a lot more refined. It doesn't have some of the torque steer that the Focus ST exhibits. The ride quality on some of the roads around here. I've complained previously about the ST and the RS with its bounciness on some roads. Civic does not exhibit any of that kind of behavior, so it's a lot nicer to live with than the ST. It's not going to win a drag race with the ST, and at least, in sedan form, the sedan does have a spoiler on the trunk lid, but it's not really huge and bold. It's bigger than, it definitely sets it apart from a standard Civic sedan, but not, it doesn't look ridiculous. It's certainly nothing like the Type R wing. And then the version on the coupe is a little bit more aggressive than that. But that's in keeping with the coupe's design relative to the sedan anyway.
Yeah, I go back and forth with like this, even the Civic Sport being somewhat overdone or decent, and just the overall design of the Civic and Civic hatch. Both Honda and Toyota seem to be trying to figure out what the next version of their design language is going to be, and they're going a little bit edgy in an attempt to be expressive, and I'm not sure it fully works on anything, although I guess if you're going to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of styling, the SI probably wears it pretty well, but I don't know, I go back and forth.
I think from a design standpoint, maybe the one thing I would complain about on the Civic is the rear fascia, the pockets, the black plastic pockets that, are meant to kind of look like vents.
Yeah.
And they're not. So I think that's maybe a little bit overdone, and I wouldn't be surprised to see, when it gets around to a mid-cycle refresh, if they maybe tone that down a little bit. But other than that, I'm quite pleased with the design. I like the design. I like the proportions of it. And I like the transition they made in the proportions from the last couple of generations of Civics. Kind of moving the base of the windshield back a little bit, giving it a more distinct break between the hood and the windshield and the greenhouse, and then sweeping back into the roof line that goes right back to the trunk lid. That's personally, I like that. And I like the hatchback even more, myself, but that's all a matter of taste anyway.
Yeah.
If you want something that's a little more restrained and refined from a design standpoint, then, I would definitely, point you in the direction of Mazda. The Mazda 3, is an outstanding alternative if you don't like something quite so ostentatious.
Yeah, but then you're giving up performance. There's not a Mazda 3 right now that competes performance-wise. They're not making the Mazda Speed 3 right now. So
right, even the 2.5 liter, I think is a little bit weaker than feels weaker than even the standard 1.5 liter turbo in the base Civic.
Well, I mean, it's another choice. It's good to have choice.
Yep.
What's the sticker at?
Absolutely. It's surprisingly affordable. It's only $23,900, and there's really only one. There's one configuration for the Civic Si, and in typical Honda fashion, they do several different trim levels, typically for each model line, and there's almost there's basically no options. You pick whichever package you want. In the case of the Si, that's one trim level, and there's one configuration of that. You basically pick your color as the only option, and then there's some dealer installed accessories you can get, but essentially, it's roughly equivalent to the EX trim level on the standard Civics. So it's the mid-level trim. It's not quite up there with the touring, but it's nicely laid out. It's got a sunroof, got the touch radio, the touchscreen radio with Android Auto and CarPlay support. Speaking of which, a couple of days ago, Google finally released an updated version of Waze with support for Android Auto. So if you like using Waze as your navigation system, you can now do that through Android Auto. And I tried it out in the Civic and the SI.
Yeah, see, I prefer to use Rage as my navigation system because checking Waze or any of that stuff is just going to make me angry because it's just going to show me the extent of the gridlock I have yet to face. And
what is this gridlock that you speak of, Dan? I'm familiar with the concept.
I'm detecting a little sarcasm, but it's.
I've spent more than enough time.
Boston gridlock is because our roads are so old, and our real estate, especially going east from where I live toward the city, like everything just gets more valuable. All the land, the closer I get to the office, and the roads just get more congested. It's there's no room for the roads to expand in a lot of places. So it's just
I know that the last couple of times I've had to head over to Detroit, I've had to make sure to time my return very carefully because back in May, they closed down I-75 south of Detroit, about a 5-mile stretch of I-75. And it's going to be closed for about a year as they completely tear it up and rebuild it. And so what they've done on the northbound side of that stretch is still open. So traffic heading north towards Detroit is fine. But anybody who has to head south is being diverted from I-75 on the north side of Detroit across I-94 over towards the airport and then south. And so that stretch of I-94 between Detroit and Dearborn is, at any time between about, 2 p.m. and 6 o'clock is just a complete mess right now. And it's going to be for the foreseeable future. So I have to make sure that I either get out early, if I'm going somewhere, or else I stick around Detroit for a while.
Yeah, and we're in construction season now too, because the temperatures are moderate. So yeah, it's the same kind of thing. They around here they do the fun thing where they'll they're replacing a lot of our bridges, even on like I-95. And so they'll divert northbound or southbound lanes across. So they got 3 lanes and then some shoulder. So they'll take away the shoulder and they'll make 2 northbound and 2 southbound lanes on the side that was like typically just northbound or southbound, right? Like they'll divert 2 lanes across the median. Mm-hmm. It's just like, what are you doing?
Yep.
It just creates crazy bottlenecks. So that's a great way for me to evaluate all the tech in cars as I sit in traffic. Correct.
Nothing better.
And so this week I have had the completely off-road capable Jeep Compass Trailhawk, and it didn't go off-road. Although they're replacing the water mains on my own street. So every morning I cross, every morning I cross 2 feet worth of gravel. They dug a trench today in the street. It's great.
So this is the new Compass,
right?
Not the ratty.
And it's both very much an improvement and not much of an improvement at the same time. It certainly looks great. Materials quality is way better in the interior. It's quieter, it's smoother. It's a nice package. It's roomier, I think. At least at first blush, it's definitely easier to get in and out of. It's less of a little cavern inside. And I do think it's actually a little bit larger, so it has a little bit more rear seat space, a little bit more cargo room. It's just a nicer vehicle. They even had
considering.
Well, I was going to say, the old one, they had tried to make it a little bit nice toward the end of its life there as they extended it.
They did upgrade the materials in the front, in the front seat, and on the dashboard and everything. They did that refresh back in
and they came out with a limited model just a couple years ago, I think in 2013, that got the 6-speed automatic. But that was a disappointment. No, it got the old Compass got the 6-speed, the old Compass Limited.
Okay. Yeah, because it originally had a CVT in there that was
and the lower trims still had that. So, that was another case of I thought it was going to be, so great because I had driven so many of those vehicles, Patriot and Compass, with the CVT, and it was just bad. And I thought that the 6-speed was going to make a big difference. No, it was still bad. This one, all of the real glaring errors are definitely taken care of. And it is a solid, much more solid choice. Nobody's going to really fault you. You're not going to get the scrunched up nose from picking the Compass, this version of the Compass that you might have with the old one. So it's still kind of an economy car platform that's turned into a Jeep. I'm not going to doubt that it's capable. Even the old Compass, again, especially with the trail rated badge on it, when it was set up right, it could do some stuff off road that you'd be really surprised at how capable it was. Driven correctly, it probably had more capability than you had talent for most people. And this is the same way, especially in Trailhawk trim. And it looks really good, but it doesn't necessarily drive anything other than an economy car that's been given sort of a little bit more ground clearance. And, the 9-speed transmission is really sluggish. The engine's not that gutsy. So there are situations, and I think it was Consumer Reports also knocked the new Compass for being so sluggish. They felt it was on the verge of being dangerous, in terms of being unresponsive. And I can't say that I go that far, but you definitely had to, if you really wanted the performance out of it, you had to manually shift it and leave it in lower gears so you could sort of wind the snot out of the engine and use what performance was there. The transmission was really, really sort of slow to respond. And that's been the case with this 9-speed in every Chrysler vehicle I've used it in. It's just been real unsatisfying, and it sometimes even gets confused or just it acts wonky, like there's a delay or a pause or some weird shifting behavior. So that's not any better. And the overall sort of solidity of the platform, just I don't know. I get kind of the same sense out of the Renegade, which is based on the same bits for the most part. It is
quite a bit
but,
smaller.
Overall, I think the best version of all of this hardware is still the Fiat 500X. It's.
Yes, I think in terms of on-road driving, I would agree with you. I think it is. I think the 500X is the best variant. Off-road, though, either of the Trailhawks, I've had an opportunity to drive both of those on some serious off-road terrain. And they, when Fiat Chrysler puts a trail rated badge on a Jeep, you can be pretty much guaranteed that it really is trail rated. I mean, there's no nonsense there. I mean, that sucker will go through just about anything you can throw at it, including 16 inches of water.
I don't doubt that they mean it when they put it on there. But let's be frank and understand that the Trailhawk, for all the capability that it carries, it's really bought because of the way it looks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. People like that look with the bigger wheels and tires and riding a little higher. Yeah. It looks, more aggressive than the standard versions. And, nothing wrong with that, I guess. No,
it looks fantastic. Yeah. And, even as I say, it feels not as solid as I would like. It's not that it's, it doesn't really ride harsh. What happens is it feels like it runs out of sort of dynamic chops quicker than I would expect. It doesn't feel comfortable. And maybe this is because it was a Trailhawk, which would probably feel a lot more comfortable off-road.
I suspect that what it is the setup of the suspension and everything, when you're running off road, you are, especially when you're doing some serious off roading, crawling, through trails, through the forest or, through water, fording a river or stream, or climbing up a steep grade, you're not going very fast. So everything is kind of moving in slow motion. And so I suspect that, that off-road tuning of the suspension is geared towards those slower but high amplitude motions that you're going to experience in that kind of condition. And, I think that, is going to have a little bit of a negative influence on the way it behaves, when you're driving on regular roads.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then they've done a really good job of balancing those two sort of competing talents. What it doesn't like on the road are those quick transients, cornering to, cornering left and then having to like an S curve, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going one direction, you've got to quickly, go around to the other direction. It doesn't like those transitions. It starts to feel a little bit unsure. Again, this is me driving, me who just got a $300 ticket a few weeks ago. So let's just say occasionally my driving style is somewhat more aggressive. So maybe the people who buy this thing because they like the butch way it looks,
optimized for off-road trail running.
They're not necessarily. Most people who own this may not ever find those dynamic sort of unsteadiness behaviors, but I noticed some of it, and I don't like it when my cars feel somewhat unsure at a level of driving intensity that I don't really deem like as pushing it. If I can start to notice it when I'm not really intending to push the car that hard, it stands out. And so again, though, this is sort of driving style, personal preference kind of stuff. I also thought it was kind of expensive, and that's also because it's the Trailhawk, but it was $34,000 on the sticker, which is that's Grand Cherokee money.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of money for Well, actually, if you compare it to other compact crossovers, I mean you compare it to an Equinox or a CRV, nicely equipped, you're going to be in that mid 30s range anyway. With any of those.
Yeah, I don't know, but see the and this is where Jeep's lineup is a little weird at the moment. You've got the Renegade, which is certainly the smallest Jeep. That makes sense. Then you've got the new Compass that is almost right on top of the Cherokee. But the Cherokee is the one that competes with the CRV in terms of size. Like that's the size. The Compass is still slightly smaller. So if you're comparing Equinox or CRV to a Jeep, you're comparing it to the Cherokee.
Maybe they've got a little bit too much granularity in their lineup.
Yeah. And then, you go from the Cherokee to the Grand Cherokee, which is, again, like, I mean, there's definitely, the Grand Cherokee's bigger, but, the Cherokee itself, like, everything's almost right on top of each other from the Compass on up. The Renegade sort of definitely fills in that sort of smaller size gap. But, for 35 grand, you're getting what is essentially the top of the line off-road hardware with the Trailhawk. You're not necessarily getting all of the luxury features, which is, I guess that's okay, but it still had cloth seats, and maybe that's part of the package. Where you get the Trailhawk with the tire track patterned seats, or well, that's actually the Dodge Rebel I'm driving after, but you get the sort of the cloth and vinyl or cloth and pleather or whatever seats, and they're nice, but
the Compass does, front wheel drive Compass does start at 21. So it's not like you can't get a more affordable one, but I mean, the Trailhawk is loaded, but it's also got a dual range transfer case, locking center differential, so for to provide you that traction, that off-road traction.
And that's
quite a bit of extra hardware in there that justifies that cost. It's not just what they've done on the inside of the cabin,
right? And those two things right there, that's, pardon my French, but that's some serious shit.
Yeah.
A two-speed transfer case and a locking center differential. That's like 90% of not getting stuck.
Right. Well, and
anywhere.
That's even you can get that in the Renegade too. I mean, that's what sets Jeep apart from all of the other crossovers. Even though these are car-based platforms, they have engineered in these serious off-road drivetrains that are capable of going through all this stuff. And I had the opportunity to drive the Renegade, the Compass, and the Cherokee, through the same off-road course, and all three of them did amazingly well. I never felt like it was at risk of getting stuck anywhere.
Yeah. So, I mean, as an actual crawler, it's fantastic. And I think that they've struck a really good balance between on-road and off-road behavior. As a mall crawler, which is what it's going to be used as in the majority of, situations, I think, for me, the dynamic performance suffers a little bit, but I haven't driven the regular Compass. This is the first time I've driven the new Compass, and it's been the Trailhawk, which does trade off some on-road performance and sort of stability and comfort for better off-road behavior.
Yeah,
so
I'd be curious to see how the Latitude or the Limited feel compared to the Trailhawk.
Yeah, and the Limited is definitely going to have those luxury features that I feel kind of should be there for $35,000. But that you buy the Trailhawk, it's a little bit more of a purposeful piece. So, I really, really like the new Compass. I think it's a great step up. I would caution you that you're paying the Jeep tax when you buy any version of this. But it's going to be competitive. You're likely to be able to buy more crossover elsewhere in terms of practical concerns like passenger room and cargo space and maybe even features for the dollar. But Jeep is, and all of Chrysler's really good at giving you nice materials. Somebody sweats the details on their cars. They're good places to be. So, I mean, I personally bought a Jeep because I liked it. I liked the way it rode and drove, and the environment inside. So there's no shame here like there used to be. I find it hilarious that you can directly compare, because you can still go buy a Patriot, which is the old Compass. So you can drive that, and then you can drive this and make your mind up. So that's all I have to say about that. I've been blathering on for too long, and we should get to topics.
All right, let's do that.
So this week, there's been a lot of nonsense about automated driving again.
Nonsense about automated driving? What could you possibly mean?
You don't say. Well, there's legislation that happened too that we haven't really covered, and I should actually read up on some of that stuff.
I actually dug up. I managed to find at least the version of it that the committee, the House Energy and Commerce Committee, was debating last week. So the version from last Friday, and who knows what it looks like today. They actually voted today. It's Thursday night as we record this, and the committee voted and passed it out of committee to the full House. But the version from last Friday, at least, they made a few changes that I'm aware of. Like they slowed down the rate at which manufacturers could deploy highly automated vehicles, the number of vehicles per year. The original version allowed manufacturers to put up to 100,000 vehicles per year on the road. That had some exemptions from some federal motor vehicle safety standards, and some of the initial reporting, as is so unfortunately so often the case,
is completely out of touch.
Yeah. So there was some interesting stuff in there when I looked through, and like I said, I have to go back now tomorrow and dig up the current version of it that they actually voted on today. But the original version, they basically what they were exempted from was the requirement to have a steering wheel and pedals. So
that's terrible.
It didn't say anything about the crash safety standards, occupant safety protection, that sort of thing. Well, I mean, if you're going to do an automated vehicle, I mean, this is what they want to do for level 4 vehicles, is they want to build vehicles that don't have any human controls.
Those are trains.
So, well, there's that. We talked about that last week, but so if they're gonna, I mean, Ford has said this, their 2021 level 4 vehicle is not going to have a steering wheel and pedals, and it's going to be used for ride hailing services. But before they can do that, they need this legislation that gives them that exemption. But what it doesn't give them an exemption from is, things like, crash safety, airbags, all of the other stuff, lighting, brake regulations, that sort of thing. All that stuff, at least as it was until a few days ago, is still there. So what changed that I know of so far is that rather than starting at 100,000 vehicles from the first year, they're allowed 25,000 the first year, ramping up an extra 25,000 each year over 3 years to get to 100,000 per year. And what they have to do in some form that is still unclear is before they get approval to put those vehicles on the road, is they have to verify that they are as safe as conventional vehicles. What that exactly means is going to be up to NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which last time I checked, still does not have an administrator under the new president. So who will be responsible for that is anyone's guess. But at least, this is the way the bill was written. So NHTSA would have to verify that these vehicles are safe enough. but that's basically the gist of it. What was interesting, and I said I don't know if it's still in there, in the version they voted on today. But there was actually some other interesting things that were added in that were part of that bill, because it was actually a package of, I think, like 14 different bills that were all compiled together that amended various other regulations and laws. And they actually tacked on a couple of things in there. One of which was directing NHTSA to look at revising the regulations for lighting. Basically to allow more modern types of lighting systems. Because there's some new types of headlights that are now rolling out in Europe that currently are not legal under the regulations here.
I see a lot of lighting on the roads here that are currently not legal. There's lots of aftermarket LED stuff going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the aftermarket stuff, and then this would obviously would refer to OEM stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing that was kind of controversial in the rules is preempting the state regulations, and I think that's one where I actually really agree with it. Is that you don't want 50 different regulations for what's allowed on automated vehicles. It would still allow states to, to define, here's how you license and register these vehicles, just as they do today. So the states could define that stuff. But in terms of the motor vehicle safety standards, that would be defined at the federal level, which I think is really how it should be, because you don't want a patchwork of different regulations for that. Granted, if you're going to do that, then you've got to have a reasonable set of regulations at the federal level. And the proposal, at least as I said from last week, also directed NHTSA to look at formulating some regulations on the performance of automated driving systems, so for things like sensing capabilities, which is something I've advocated for a long time. That if you're going to have any regulations at all for automated driving, that's something that should be in there, is looking at how, making sure that you have some baseline performance requirements for things like the sensing systems. And the other thing they had in there was also directing NHTSA to look at, how you could make sure that the cybersecurity was addressed. Figuring out some sort of standards for cybersecurity for these automated vehicles. And again, it didn't get into specifics, just directing NHTSA, to start studying this and look at, what do we need in terms of regulation on that count.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right now they're a little bit preoccupied with other regulation.
Yeah.
So we could just call this the skinny autonomous care bill and see how that happens. But it's not to delve too far into my own personal politics, but for a administration and government that's bent on undoing so many regulations and so much, it's sort of so much oversight. Like I think they're trying to get rid of like ARPA and like a lot of things that kind of inform what technology is going to do for us in the future. These are things that actually need more regulatory oversight. And when your whole premise is to undo that kind of stuff, like you can't have it both ways. So
yeah, I mean, I was actually surprised when I read through the language of what they were discussing last week, and it actually seemed like a shockingly rational proposal, which makes
it's not healthcare.
It will never pass, but
right. Well, no. It'll pass. This is about cars and big business. It's not about taking care of the population. So, all right. Sorry, I'm getting too sarcastic. We should just keep going.
So further on the topic of autonomous vehicles.
Yeah. So you actually wrote a post for the Navigant Research blog about the automated driving, how it's sort of going to turn into the what goes on in the App Store. Yeah,
well, not that it will, but it looks like it's going in that direction. So if you haven't necessarily been paying attention to the market for smartphone apps, every couple times a year when Apple has their big events and Tim Cook, their CEO, gets up on stage and touts how many billions of dollars Apple has paid out to developers over the last 9 years since they launched the iPhone App Store, and how many millions of apps there are in the App Store. One of the things that Tim Cook never talks about is what the distribution of those billions of dollars. I think the most recent figure was about $18 billion that they've paid out to app developers over the last 9 years, which is fantastic. It's amazing, and they've had over 2 million apps in the App Store. But what he neglects to mention is that from a study last year that was published last year, roughly 96% of all of that revenue goes to like the top 200 developers.
Yeah, but I mean, so it's kind of like one of those 'twas always thus things, not just in the App Store, but with any kind of marketplace. Really, you're going to have dominant players.
Exactly. That's and I'm not fundamentally opposed to that. I mean, that's just the reality of the way modern commercial markets work. It tends to get concentrated. Starts off. In the early days of the App Store, when a bunch of independent developers got in there, and guys like Marco Arment, launched apps like Instagram Instapaper, and then there was Instagram and all kinds of other stuff. A lot of these independent developers were able to make a pretty decent living early on, but today it's really difficult, to near impossible for an independent developer to get any kind of real traction in the App Store. Most of the most popular apps, if you look at all the most popular apps in the App Store, all of them, come from predominantly Facebook, Google, and Amazon. That's the stuff that's out there that's getting the most traction. And then, in games, you've got companies like King I think it's King that does Candy Crush Saga.
Yeah.
So, there's this handful of companies that dominate the marketplace. And what I wrote about today on my company's blog was how the automated driving space is rapidly looking like it's turning into the same thing. If you look at Silicon Valley, and it's like every time I turn around, there's some other startup, with 3 or 4 guys, setting up shop somewhere in Silicon Valley to develop automated driving software. There's dozens, perhaps I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the hundreds of these little startups, that are getting seed funding from investors, getting a few million here, a few million there. And, and in some cases, they've managed to ramp up fairly quickly and get acquired. So companies like Cruise Automation that got acquired by GM last year, and Argo AI. And the thing is, what most of these guys are doing is the same thing. Most of them are just doing software. They're not developing hardware. They're not developing the services to deploy this stuff. They're just doing the self-driving software. And from what I'm seeing, that stuff is already starting to reach a reasonable level of maturity. And it's not clear that there's going to be any significant breakthroughs on the software side that are going to justify, or that are going to allow any of these guys to make a real mark in the marketplace.
Yeah, well, so the entrepreneurial side of me looks at this and says, of course, they're setting, you're going to San Francisco and setting up shop, or, Silicon Valley, because that's where the talent is. You're going to find the people who've had some experience with this stuff in that area. Also, that's where the money is. That's where you can meet the people.
Lots of money.
Right. Lots of
right.
Silly money.
And that's my point, is that there's all these VCs and angel investors that are, willing to throw, millions of dollars at these guys in the hope that, they're going to come up with something that's going to get them a huge exit, a huge acquisition from somebody.
Right, and that's what they're doing it for. They're not doing it. See, the early stuff, like early apps, right? They were passion projects to a certain degree.
Oh yeah,
and it was an immature marketplace, so it hadn't then become flooded with these big players, because it is a marketplace as well. So you're marketing your wares, right? And once that sort of ossifies and becomes a pretty standardized way of selling things, it becomes a lot more difficult and a lot more sort of expensive and standardized as a way to just get the name of your thing out there. And I think that's kind of the same thing that's going on with the autonomous vehicle software and hardware development and everything, and just that environment out in Silicon Valley. It's sort of quickly like those dominant players have established themselves. It's hard to make a mark on your own, but what you can do is go meet the people who know the people who will get, who will acquire you. And so you come up with something that's like marginally interesting. Maybe you are passionate about it, but your end goal is not to, build the next Tesla. Your end goal is to get bought by Tesla.
right.
Those are different things.
Or some other OEM.
Right. Or like we've seen GM or Ford. And I think, honestly, those are going to be the companies, and we've talked about that. GM and Ford are going to be the companies and other major automakers.
And BMW and Volkswagen and Nissan. Yeah.
Those are going to be the ones. And it's, again, like you pointed at the App Store, those are the ones who can afford to dominate, because this stuff takes time. They're sitting on piles of money. They've got other revenue streams. They can pay people to develop things, or they can pay people for, to buy the things that they've already developed. And that's actually a really good way for an established brand or established company to do it, is let somebody else take all the risk and then just buy it.
Yeah. and I think, this is rapidly turning into, just like every other gold rush that's ever happened.
Yeah.
or metal rush, where, all the prospectors and all these guys, starting up their little, 2, 5, 6 person shops in the Valley, these guys are all the prospectors that are out there panning for gold in the stream. And almost none of them will ever make a dime off the work they're doing. The people that are making the bucks off of this, that are making all the money off of this, are the guys selling the shovels and the pans and the sifters, the hardware salesman, which in this case is the NVIDIAs and the Intels and, all the sensor suppliers, the hardware companies that are selling them all the pieces that they need to do their software development. That's where the money is. And, I think that, for the VCs that are pouring in money into all these startups, for VCs, the way that business works anyway is, they know, that 90% or more of the projects that they invest in are going to fail. What they count on is, 1 out of every 10 hits big.
Right. Well, and it's other people's money, right? And they're looking for those unicorns, and so you have that ratio of success to failure. It's, I don't know.
I think at this point it's already too late for even that 1 out of 10 for any further investments, and I think that they would be wise to look elsewhere at this point.
Guys, look at innovation in the healthcare market, especially around stuff like electronic health records and seamless transfer of information between practices and providers. And if you could work on a single payer system that's affordable, that'd be great. Okay? Thanks. I think that's something we should solve.
Yeah. All right.
Let's talk about something else then.
Okay. So car companies looking at gutting their car model lineups.
Yeah, I heard about that. There was the talk that the Impala could go, and even the Volt, and Ford's also looking to trim the Taurus. What else is on the
a bunch of these are obvious ones, but
all of those are obvious. Yeah,
I mean it's all coming out of the fact that the market as a whole is shifting from cars to crossovers and SUVs. So this year, the market, we're going to have a decline, significant decline in sales for the first time since 2010. And it's probably going to keep continuing to decline for a couple more years before it starts to climb back up again. But even within that decline, cars are declining much faster than trucks and utilities. And so, car makers are looking at, reducing the number of car models that they're selling. And so for GM, there was a report earlier this week that they might cut as many as 6 car models, most of which are actually built at one plant in Detroit, the Detroit Hamtramck assembly plant, possibly cutting the Impala, the Volt, the Buick LaCrosse, the Cadillac CT6, and I forget what the other 2 are now.
Yeah, but they came back and said that the CT6 is actually probably safe for now.
Yeah. I don't think they'll kill the CT6 at this point, at least for another generation. But the other ones, wouldn't be surprised to see the big sedans go, because that's a rapidly declining market. And for the same reason, Ford has already said that the next generation Taurus that they're building in China is not going to be not going to be coming to the U.S. market. And that's based on a stretched version of the Fusion platform. That's not coming to the U.S. And in all likelihood, the Taurus will die next year in 2018. I mean, it's already pretty old. The current iteration came out in 2010. So
that's not really a surprise. It's an okay car. It's well outclassed by the LaCrosse and the Impala at this point, and nobody's buying those things.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense to just kill the stuff that's not selling. Like, don't hang on to large sedans because of tradition. Like, if they're not selling, stop building them. When there's demand, build them again.
Yeah,
seems to make sense.
Hyundai already discontinued the Azera in the U.S. market, so I would not be at all surprised to see some, if not all, of those models go away over the next couple of years.
Yeah, and these are the cars that they don't try as hard to sell. I think of all of them, GM is trying to sell us large cars sort of more aggressively. Like, you really don't hear or see much about the Taurus or the Azera. It's just they're not trying to make people aware of them, and that's not where the money is. So go where the money is,
Yeah,
that makes sense. So we're probably going to see like some of these avoid getting cut, and there'll be some think pieces about how, lamenting the death of the large sedan because crossovers are popular. And so that means everybody who writes about cars and crossovers hates crossovers because they're popular. That's sort of like, circle of hatred or whatever. It used to be SUVs, and then it was minivans before that, and just whatever's popular apparently as auto writers, we're not supposed to like it.
And at some point, if customers start dumping their crossovers and going back to sedans, then manufacturers will just shift back. They go with whatever customers want to buy.
Yeah, and honestly, crossovers are popular because they do a lot of stuff that people want or people think they need.
It's what they think they want.
Well, I mean, what they think they want turns out to be what they want when they're purchasing. Like, they've convinced themselves.
Wagons, that's what you should.
Well, that's what crossovers are. Really, like,
they don't need to be that high.
No, I agree, except for I have one in my driveway. I have a Grand Cherokee in my driveway. Why did we buy a Grand Cherokee?
Because you're a hypocrite.
Yes. Okay. At least I bought a Jeep. I didn't, we test drove some other stuff. I was like, nope. This is not credible enough.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
One.
I mean, I personally won't. Like, I think the people who will miss the fleet, the full size cars the most, are the fleet operators.
Yeah. And especially like police agencies and stuff. But I think like police agencies have already shifted as well. The by far and away the most popular police vehicle in the U.S. now is the Explorer, the Ford Police Interceptor Utility, as they call it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not badged as an Explorer, but it's an Explorer.
That's what I got pulled over by.
Yeah. So, for Ford, that way outsells the Taurus sedan Interceptors, and Ford introduced, they launched a Fusion hybrid based police car at the New York Auto Show in April, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if sometime between now and next spring we hear that the Taurus-based Police Interceptor is going to be discontinued, and a new Police Interceptor sedan is based on the Fusion Sport. So you have the EcoBoost V6 Fusion-based Police Interceptor, because they've already done all the Police Interceptor work for the hybrid version. So it's just a matter of putting the higher performance powertrain in that for the Interceptor sedan, and then the only other one. GM is already, I think they've already stopped selling the Caprice, the Australian-built Caprice police cars, and they're mainly focused on Tahoes now. And Fiat Chrysler, they're I think they have the most market share among police cars as opposed to utilities. The Chargers, Chargers are doing pretty well, but they're still are vastly outnumbered by Explorers.
Oh yeah, Ford really owns the police market at this point.
Yeah, they have about 60% of the police market now.
Which is, that's really interesting because Chrysler back in the day, Plymouth actually was huge in police vehicles through the 60s and 70s. They've really had a pretty solid lock on it. But yeah, the issue with like the Fusion or even the Charger is that they're somewhat tight.
Yeah, well, especially the trunk. I remember back in like 2008 or 9, I actually went out to the Chrysler Chelsea Proving Grounds, where every September the Michigan State Police does their big test of all the police vehicles, and they do a bunch of performance testing on police vehicles and rate them all. And between the Michigan State Police and the LA County Sheriff's Department does some testing as well. Between those two, the data generated by those two agencies is used by pretty much all police agencies to decide which vehicles they want to buy. And one of the, at that time, this was not long after Chrysler had launched the Charger Charger Pursuit, I think is what it's officially called. But the Charger police car, and one of the things that they, when I talked to some of the officers there, they said they loved the performance of the Charger. It was it was really fast, but they still preferred the Crown Vics, which were still in production at that time, because they were more useful in terms of the trunk space. Because police officers today, especially ones highway patrols and those doing general patrol, they carry around a lot of gear in the back of the car. There's all the radios and emergency equipment, so there's a lot of gear in the trunk. And the Charger always had a smaller trunk, and the opening to the trunk was not as useful for getting stuff in and out as it was in the Crown Vic. And they had once Ford dropped the Crown Vic and transitioned over to the Taurus, it had the same problem. And the reason why the Explorer is so popular is because as a utility, it's got that big opening in the back. It's much easier for them to get their gear in and out of there and do all the things they need to do with police vehicles, with modern police vehicles. So I think the Charger. The Charger is still popular for highway patrols for doing pursuit because it does have the performance. But it's aside from that, most agencies prefer to go with the Explorers. Yeah,
well, and when Chrysler sort of re-entered the market with the Charger too, one of the things that they had to deal with was if you've got a whole fleet of Crown Victorias and you're still making the Crown Victoria, you're going to go with the thing you're set up to support. You've got all those spare parts. Mm-hmm. You've got, the Ford's actual fleet support is really good. I guess if you need parts and service and stuff like that, Ford takes care of its fleet because they've been doing it a long time. They just know how to take care of it. And that was one of the things in talking with a Mass State officer was, the Chryslers, I was like, how do you like your Charger? He's like, I love it. It's great. But, sometimes the downtime is there, an issue, and they are not quite as durable, at least at that point, as the Crown Vic that's probably been sorted out by now. But so Ford just, they got themselves entrenched and they're good at it. So I would assume that you're going to see a lot of Explorers, even if they make a Fusion Interceptor.
But FCA would be wise to do a police version of the Durango, the Dodge Durango, as an alternative to the Charger, or
the Pacifica paddy wagon.
For that, as a front wheel drive vehicle, I don't think the Pacifica would be that useful as a pursuit vehicle. But
I mean, how many pursuits? So that's the thing, right? You've got municipal vehicles and then pursuits, and I don't know. I think especially with the way police forces are militarizing, you could put all kinds of stuff in there.
That's true.
But you know what? Speaking of criminal activity, I think that's a good time to talk about the Volkswagen Dieselgate fix, how that's rolling out in Germany, where the German government.
And there's news here today, too, as well.
Yeah, that's right. This seems like a much larger, like an octopus of a problem, too. Like the idea that they basically colluded to.
Well, there's that. Yeah.
Which is sort of the last piece of news that I touched on.
Yeah. So there's, accusations last week that the big German automakers, Volkswagen, Daimler, and BMW, supposedly colluded beginning in the late 1990s. A couple of ways. One on diesel emission controls, but also on more generally doing some price fixing stuff, which is certainly not legal. And they are denying it. BMW has been most vociferous about denying it. But we'll see. I mean, we don't know what's going on there. I mean, that's still too early to tell, if that's real or not. But what's interesting is on the diesel stuff, Volkswagen came out with a fix last year in 2016 for European diesel vehicles that was supposed to address the emissions problems. But when they started applying it to customer vehicles, a lot of customers were complaining that it hurt performance and fuel economy of their vehicles. And so a fairly large percentage of customers over there decided that they just weren't going to bring their cars in and have the fix done, or have the recall work done on their vehicles, and they were just going to keep driving them the way they were. And when something like that happens here in the U.S., what typically happens, the Department of Transportation monitors when a manufacturer does a recall, and if a certain percentage of vehicles haven't been repaired within a certain time period, and this happened to Chrysler a few years ago with an issue on the Rams, they go back and find the manufacturer, or in some cases, force them to do a buyback, which they did with Chrysler on those Rams, and buy back a bunch of vehicles. If customers didn't bring them in, well, the thing is, what are you going to do? If you send out recall notices to your customers and they don't bring the vehicles in to be fixed, you're going to go out and tow those vehicles into your dealership and forcibly fix them. So it seems kind of unfair to go after the manufacturers in that case. So what's happening in Germany is the German government is actually talking about deregistering vehicles that haven't been repaired. So if you don't bring your Volkswagen or Audi diesel vehicle in to get this update, your vehicle registration will be canceled. Your license plate will be canceled on that vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, that puts the sort of burden of action kind of squarely where it needs to be at this point. And I say that as an owner of a vehicle that's got a couple of open recall campaigns on it that has not been back to get those recall campaigns performed.
You got some Takata airbags?
I don't know that I've got the Takata airbags. I have the fuel pump relay, the total integrated power module, which has a relay attached to the circuit board that will overheat and will sometimes just cause the thing to shut off. I haven't had a problem yet, so I mean, I have to get it done. I just haven't. The last time I checked, they didn't have the part, which is the other thing. You know, those recalls are mandated, at least here in the US. You know, like you as a manufacturer, when you decide it's time to do a recall, or if you get forced into doing a recall, you have to send the notices out. That doesn't necessarily align with the timing of the replacement parts. I mean, that's the Takata thing right now. Like there just weren't airbags to replace them. So,
and that's the case with, you know, several tens of millions of vehicles that are on the road that have not been updated and have not had their airbags replaced because there were no replacement parts yet to put on them.
Yeah. So I think it's a good measure, honestly. Like, I mean, it's like, hey, get your thing fixed.
Yeah.
You know, like
well, it'll be curious to see what happens here because, you know, as I mentioned today, news came out that EPA and CARB, the California Air Resources Board, finally approved a fix for the first generation Volkswagen 2-liter TDI engines for the emissions. So I think so far of the 400, let's see, there were, I believe, roughly 360,000 of those vehicles with that engine in them. And of the 480,000 totally affected vehicles, I think over 300,000 have already been repurchased by Volkswagen. You know, customers have brought them in and sold them back to Volkswagen. And those are all sitting in lots scattered around the country, including the Pontiac Silverdome parking lot. Now that there's a fix for customers that don't want to sell their cars back to Volkswagen, they will be able to get this fixed, or this, instead of using the word fix, they will be able to get this update done, which it's not clear.
Well, why are you saying update instead of fix?
Well, because it's likely that it will reduce the performance of the engine and also reduce the fuel efficiency. So some reports have said, you know, it could knock 2 to 3 miles per gallon off the fuel efficiency. And, you know, it may cut the power rating of the engine as well. So we don't know for sure yet. In fact, we don't even know for sure exactly what the changes are, other than the NOx catalyst is going to be replaced. What it's going to be replaced with is unknown at this point. We don't know if they're going to be installing urea injection systems or just using a larger NOx trap, or, you know, none of that has been revealed yet. So the extent of the modifications is unknown, but for those customers that still haven't sold their cars back to Volkswagen, including one friend of ours who still has her 2011, I think, or 2010 or 11 Jetta wagon. This will be an opportunity to keep their vehicles and get them updated. And for the hundreds of thousands of cars that Volkswagen has bought back, they'll be able to make this update to those vehicles and then resell them if they want to as used vehicles.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can understand why they don't want to get them updated, because part of the reason why you like the car is the way it performs. And if the update is going to mess with that, like, it's not the same car, you know, like it. And I would expect it's very reasonable to expect the economy and the performance to be reduced, because that's kind of the way you reduce the emissions is, you know, you make it run a little less on the ragged edge. So, yeah, I mean, I would take the money personally.
That's what I did.
I just
take the money,
you know,
and run.
Yeah, I don't want the car back after you've given it a lobotomy. Just give me the cash.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what we decided to do. So, it's, you know, we're happy with our decision, you know, and, you know, well, I don't want to get into Volkswagen reliability issues.
But yeah, you just said all you need to say.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Why don't we dive in? We had one question that came in on Twitter earlier this week. Why don't you cue it up for us, Dan?
sure. You didn't want to talk about the lunatic in Silicon Valley who thinks that self-driving cars are going to cost $400,000?
No. To the guy who's the 22-year-old founder of some company called Luminar, self-driving cars are not going to cost $400,000. They will.
Cool name though.
They will be expensive. They will cost a lot more, and that's why they probably won't be sold to consumers for the most part. But I've already discussed that, and 400,000 is ridiculous.
No, look, man, those things are going to be so wrapped in advertising. They're not. They may be free.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
it will all be on the inside where you can't escape from it.
It will be both.
Yes.
If there's a surface you can put advertising on, it will have it. They're going to use those new Samsung OLED panels that can bend.
Oh, there
and
we
go. They're going to wrap the car and yeah, it's going to be disgusting. Our future's going to look like Blade Runner.
It already does.
Yeah, that's true. So we, Jesus. At least it doesn't look like Brazil yet.
Yeah.
Yet. But they're working on the healthcare bill. It's going to be like that dentist scene.
Okay, move on.
Okay, so we had a question on Twitter about how we would turn Lincoln into a actual world-class luxury brand. And I thought it was interesting because we both answered this question independently, yet we came up with some of the same conclusions.
Yeah, basically, it's a matter of trying to make Lincoln vehicles relevant for today's market. So you suggested a highly luxurious EV minivan.
Because that's something that doesn't exist. And I see how many people buy like the Honda Pilot Elite, at least around here in an area where there's families with money and they're concerned about buying the finest consumer goods, especially if other people can see. Yeah, there's a lot of those around here and they're expensive. That's a $50,000 minivan. So and people love Teslas, they're like cockroaches on the road here too. So combine those 2 points, an all electric minivan that is very luxurious. And I think that at a certain volume, certainly more than Lincoln manages to actually sell of conventional automobiles, you could probably do well with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's definitely some potential there to do something interesting. And I think the other thing that Lincoln really needs to focus on is electrification. And I suspect that this is part of the plan already. When back in late 2015, Ford announced that they were going to do 13 new electrified nameplates by 2020. And I think at least a couple of those and maybe more will be Lincoln branded vehicles. Because, if you look at the market, you look at BMW, for example, they now offer plug-in hybrids and plug-in hybrid powertrains on all of their major name model lines, from the 3 Series, 5 Series, 7 Series, the X5, the X3, they're all available with plug-in hybrids now. And, part of the reason why premium brands are going this direction, especially when they have more mainstream brands as part of their portfolio as well, is it's easier to sell those vehicles, because you can tune them for a little more performance than you would for mainstream. Instead of focusing on maximum fuel efficiency, you can tune them for a little more performance, get a big gain in fuel efficiency, get a performance bump, and then it's easier to get those customers at those higher price points to absorb the extra cost of that hardware. And so, instead of, selling them at break even or losing money on them, you can sell them at a profit. And I think that's actually working out reasonably well for BMW right now. Mercedes is going more that direction. Folks, Audi, we're seeing more electrified vehicles being added to the Audi lineup. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. And I think, it would be smart for Lincoln to do the same thing, they've got the MKZ hybrid, but I think, I'm surprised that they haven't already launched a version of the Continental with the plug-in hybrid powertrain from the Fusion Energy, but using a more powerful engine instead of the 2-liter Atkinson that the Fusion has, maybe using a 2-liter EcoBoost, or even the 2.3-liter EcoBoost, with a plug-in hybrid for, performance comparable to the twin turbo V6, but also giving it, 15, 20 miles of electric driving range on top of that.
Yeah. So the thing that, Lincoln has really two problems here. And the thing that makes BMW successful is BMW has so carefully built a reputation and a brand and an image. And they're known as a premium product, as a premium car. People are willing to spend the money for them. Lincoln is, on the other hand, still kind of a joke. They have that old man car image. People still think of town cars when they say Lincoln, although there hasn't been a town car for a long time, 5 years at least, right?
Right.
So they also have kind of a confused lineup. The styling was wonky. They had weird stuff like the MKT, and they're now being a little bit more cohesive. But even the MKZ, it's a Fusion, and it doesn't separate itself as well from the Fusion as it should. Like they try, but really, there's nothing distinctive enough, and Lincoln hasn't.
I don't know. I would argue with that. I think the MKZ has got pretty distinctive styling from the Fusion. It does not.
Now it does. Yeah. And styling wise, yes, it's been separated for the last couple generations. Even when they had the split grille. The last two sort of generations of the MKZ, you're right. They do look different, but on the inside, it's, to me, I get in one of those, I'm like, this is a Fusion. It doesn't feel different enough.
Yeah. The MKZ, was set apart by being, when they launched the current generation, in 2012, the MKZ was the only one that had a V6. The Fusions all had 4-cylinder engines. So, they had that going for them. They did have the hybrid, but that was the exact same powertrain that was in the Fusion hybrid. And I think what they need to do is kind of step up their game a little bit on the electrification. And I suspect that they will. There's been some rumors that they're going to do a new Aviator 3-row crossover, which will almost certainly be based on the next generation Explorer, which is due sooner rather than later. So I think when that one arrives, we'll probably see some sort of electrified powertrain in there, either a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid. I think that would be smart for them to do that. And the direction that Lincoln's been trying to go recently is trying to promote this idea of quiet luxury. So they're not trying to be ostentatious, but they're trying to be very refined. Because they know that they're not going to be able to do the whole driver's car kind of thing, and they don't want to try and emulate, BMW or even what Cadillac's been trying to do. So they're trying to go a different direction, and create that refined luxury feel. And I think electrification could actually help them do that. Especially if they have plug-in hybrids with some decent amount of electric driving range. The quietness of driving on electricity, I think, would fit really well with that quiet luxury image.
Well, yeah, and they really, I guess what I was getting at was that they really need something that's very distinctive, because if Lincoln is to survive on its own merit versus the good graces of the Ford Motor Company, they really do need to build up to some sort of critical mass of sales and desirability in a short time. And the way to do that isn't to try to compete with BMW or even Cadillac, but they really need to find those opportunities that exist for an automaker to do something that's different, that hasn't really been satisfied, or there's only sort of one or two other alternatives, which is why I went for the electrified minivan, but also, like an Aviator with an electrified powertrain, either hybrid or fully electric. Like, that's a fantastic idea. Something that has the potential to to carry the luxury, right? Luxury vehicles are high profit. So, a lot of the engineering is there in the Ford parts bin. It's how well it stands apart, how much different it looks, how much more nicely it's appointed, and how hard they sell it, how they position it. And right now, man, I don't know what Lincoln is trying to say. That's a big part of it. And they can reinvent themselves, and they'd be much better off trying to reinvent themselves as a contemporary of those guys in Silicon Valley that we talked about a little while ago than trying to really calm down us hair splitters who say, the Fusion didn't offer V6, but the MKZ did. You know what? Like, nobody cares about that. It needs to, except for us, like, it needs to be a really big break, something that's much more distinctive and really stands on its own and makes some waves. And they can do that even for not a lot of money.
Yeah. And, the more I think about it, an EV minivan, certainly, an EV of some sort, I think is an essential part of their lineup, if they really want to push that quiet luxury thing. But an EV minivan would be interesting. I guess I'm wondering, if there's going to be enough people that want to buy, say a $75,000 electric minivan.
Well, the other thought that had me thinking of the electric minivan was, Lincoln could get big into partnering with and autonomous services, and Ford owns Chariot. So having a vehicle that works real well for ride hailing and autonomous services, instead of Volvo XC90s, why doesn't Lincoln go and lease a bunch of their cars to Uber? Yeah.
Well, and I think that's exactly the direction they're going to go. A previous blog post I wrote a couple of months ago postulated that, exactly that, not using the Chariot brand, but the Lincoln Chauffeur brand that they recently launched, which they're piloting in a couple of cities right now. And right now, it uses Lincoln Chauffeur. Actually, Lincoln vets human drivers. If you want to go out for a night on the town and you don't want to drive your Lincoln, you can call up, their concierge service, and they will send over a professional driver to drive you and your partner around for the evening, or pick up your kids or whatever else you want. And if you get if you live in one of the cities where they're piloting the program right now, if you buy, the Lincoln, one of the black label Lincolns, I think you get a certain number of hours of chauffeur service included with that. And then they charge I can't remember what it is, but there's an hourly rate beyond that. But I think longer term, that idea of chauffeur is how they would implement a premium automated mobility service. So once you've got automated vehicles, you could have automated Lincolns that provide you that same kind of service, and they could use that Lincoln Chauffeur branding for that. Yeah, well, and especially because it's a premium luxury brand, and there's lots of people in business that would like that, right? Like, I saw an article today where most business travelers actually now don't use cabs; they use ride hailing. Yeah. So to offer a premium ride hailing service that's aimed at something. Right. Exactly. So it's aimed at sort of higher end business travelers, and get your vehicles out there. And especially if you have the vehicle that can accommodate comfortably a business traveler, right? Like either a large crossover or a minivan, which Ford doesn't have, but they could, engineer something. I have faith. And so like you get off your plane, you have plenty of space to put your crap. You've got, two really nice reclining, second row seats. Thing has an internet connection and all kinds of tech in it. You can, it's got a Keurig in the center console.
Like, and I'm just saying, like, it's not hard.
Machine. No, none of this Keurig nonsense.
Sure. Right. Yes. A pour over kind of.
Actually, it would have a barista in there.
Right. There's enough room. I mean, come on. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to do a minivan, you might as well do it right. Have a barista, to prepare exactly what you want.
Well, actually, and Ford has that system, right? That recovers the evaporated water from the condensate from the AC. So it's just, I mean, you could use that to make the coffee, right? You just got to heat it on the exhaust a little bit. We've got this all worked out.
Yeah, perfect. We'll call up Kumar Golhatra tomorrow morning, and we'll lay it out for him, and they'll have it implemented by the end of the month.
I mean, I would really like that as a project. Maybe they could give me Lincoln and see what I can do with it.
Yes.
All right. I think that's a podcast.
Yes, absolutely. That's more than.
All right. So please review us on Apple Podcasts or iTunes or wherever you get the podcast. Toss us
your car loving friends to come and subscribe to the show.
We are on Twitter at Wheelbearings Cast. No vowels except for the A. We're on Facebook. And you can shoot us emails. You can find me at Boston_auto. Sam, you're at Sam Obuel Samid on Twitter, and you're also on Facebook. You're everywhere. You're more places than I am.
I am a shameless self-promoter.
Yeah, it's what you have to be. And so we will be back next time with more.
Absolutely. See you next time. Bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.